I never thought the worst day of my life would start with the most beautiful sunrise I'd ever seen. But before I dive into this story that changed everything about who I thought I was, let me ask you something. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to share with you happened in small-town Georgia. But betrayal. Betrayal is universal. And if you've ever trusted someone completely, only to have that trust shattered into a million pieces, you're going to understand every word I'm about to say. The morning of October 15th started at 5:47 a.m. with my phone buzzing against the nightstand in my childhood bedroom. My maid of honor, Jessica, was calling to check if I was awake. Of course I was awake. I'd been staring at the ceiling for 2 hours, watching the shadows shift as dawn crept across the walls of the room where I'd dreamed of this day since I was 7 years old. Today's the day, bride. Jessica's voice was bright, almost aggressively cheerful. I could hear coffee brewing in the background, and I knew she was already dressed and ready to come over with the entire bridal party in tow. Today's the day, I whispered back, but something felt different. There was a weight in my chest that I couldn't name, a heaviness that had nothing to do with pre-wedding nerves. My name is Caroline Mitchell, and I was 32 years old on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I'd been with David Chen for 4 years. Met him at a medical conference where I was presenting research on pediatric cardiology and he was there representing his family's pharmaceutical company. He had these warm brown eyes and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. When he proposed on Christmas morning 18 months earlier, surrounded by both our families in my parents' living room, I thought I'd finally found my fairy tale. The dress hanging on my closet door was everything I'd dreamed of, vintage lace with pearl buttons that my mother had sewn on herself, each one a small prayer for my happiness. The veil had belonged to my grandmother, then my mother, and now it was supposed to be mine. 3 generations of love stories, all leading to this moment. But as I sat there in my cotton pajamas, staring at that dress, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It started 3 weeks ago, though I didn't recognize it then. David had been distant, checking his phone constantly, taking calls in another room. When I asked about it, he'd kiss my forehead and say it was just work stress, that once we got through the wedding everything would go back to normal. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because when you're planning a life with someone, you choose trust even when doubt whispers in your ear. My younger sister Emma had been acting strange too. She was 28 then, 4 years younger than me, and had always been the wild one in our family. While I was in medical school, she was backpacking through Europe. While I was building my career, she was jumping from job to job, relationship to relationship, never settling down. Our parents worried about her, but I always defended Emma. She was finding herself, I'd say. She was living life on her own terms. Emma was supposed to be my maid of honor originally, but 6 months before the wedding, she asked if Jessica could take over because she was going through some things. I didn't push. Emma had always been dramatic, and I figured she was having another one of her quarter-life crisis moments. Looking back now, I realized she wasn't having a crisis at all. She was making a choice. The morning sun was fully up by the time I finally got out of bed and padded downstairs to find my mother already in the kitchen, humming while she arranged white roses in mason jars. Mom had been planning this wedding almost as much as I had, and seeing her so happy made my chest tighten with guilt for the doubts I couldn't shake. "There's my beautiful bride," she said, looking up with tears already forming in her eyes. "I can't believe my baby is getting married today." I forced a smile and let her hug me, breathing in her familiar scent of vanilla and jasmine perfume. For just a moment, wrapped in my mother's arms, everything felt like it was going to be okay. Then my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Emma. "Need to talk. Important. Can you meet me at the old oak tree before everyone gets there?" The old oak tree was in the back corner of our family's property, where Emma and I used to build forts and tell secrets when we were kids. We hadn't met there in years, not since high school when she wanted to confess she'd been sneaking out to see boys our parents wouldn't approve of. I texted back, "Everything okay? Kind of busy with the whole getting married thing today." Her response came immediately, "Please, Caroline. It's about David." My blood went cold. I stared at those 4 words, "It's about David," and felt the world tilt sideways. Whatever doubt had been nagging at me crystallized into pure, ice-cold fear. I told my mother I needed some air and walked out to the oak tree, still in my pajamas and bare feet, the October morning crisp against my skin. Emma was already there, pacing back and forth, her dark hair messy like she'd been running her hands through it. She looked up when she heard me approaching, and I saw something in her expression that made my stomach drop. "Emma, what's going on?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. I'd never seen my confident, outspoken sister struggle for words before. "Caroline, God, I don't know how to say this." "Just say it." She took a shaky breath. "David and we've been seeing each other." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, catching myself against the tree trunk. "What do you mean, seeing each other?" "For 3 months. It started when he came over to help move furniture for Mom's birthday party. You were at the hospital doing that emergency surgery, remember? And we just talked. Really talked. And then what?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, hollow and sharp at the same time. Emma's face crumpled. "And then we kissed. And it kept happening. Caroline, I tried to stop it. I swear I tried. But I love him. I love him." Present tense. Not loved. Love. The ground beneath my feet felt unsteady, like the earth itself was betraying me. This was my sister. My baby sister who I'd protected and defended and loved unconditionally my entire life. And David who had looked me in the eye every single day for 3 months and told me he loved me, planned our future with me, made love to me while he was. "Are you telling me this because you want to confess? Because you want forgiveness?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. Emma shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm telling you because he's going to call off the wedding." The world stopped. Completely, utterly stopped. "What?" "He's going to call off the wedding, Caroline. He was supposed to talk to you yesterday, but he couldn't do it. He's going to do it this morning, before the ceremony." I felt like I was drowning, but instead of water, it was rage and heartbreak and disbelief filling my lungs. "So you thought you'd save him the trouble?" I thought maybe if it came from me, it would hurt less." I laughed, and the sound was bitter and broken. "You thought it would hurt less coming from my own sister." Emma was sobbing now, but I felt nothing for her tears. Nothing but a cold, calculating fury that I'd never experienced before. In that moment, standing under the oak tree where we'd shared childhood secrets, I stopped being the sister who protected Emma from consequences. I started being someone else entirely. Someone who understood that the people who can hurt you most are the ones you never see coming. I walked back to the house in a daze, my bare feet moving automatically across the dewy grass while my mind tried to process what had just happened. Emma called after me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because if I looked at her again, I might have said something I could never take back. Or worse, I might have done something I could never take back. The house was buzzing with activity when I walked through the back door. Jessica had arrived with the other bridesmaids, and they were already setting up a mimosa station on the kitchen island. Hair and makeup artists were unpacking their cases in the living room. My Aunt Sarah was arranging programs in the front hallway, and my cousin Beth was directing the florist on where to put the ceremony arrangements. Everyone was moving with purpose, their faces bright with excitement and joy, and I felt like I was watching it all from behind glass. Like I was already gone, already not part of this day that was supposed to be mine. "Caroline, there you are." Jessica rushed over with a champagne flute filled with orange juice and Prosecco. "You look a little pale, babe. Pre-wedding nerves." I took the glass with shaking hands and nodded, not trusting my voice. If I spoke, I might scream. If I screamed, I might never stop. My phone buzzed again. "David. Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to marry you today. Love you." I stared at the message for a long time. Love you. The same words he'd been saying to me for 4 years. The same words he'd probably been saying to Emma for 3 months. How do the same 3 words mean everything and nothing at all? But here's what I realized standing in that kitchen, surrounded by people who loved me, holding a text message from a man who was about to destroy me. I had a choice. I could let this break me, or I could take control of how this story ended. And if you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, if you've ever felt that moment when you realize everything you thought you knew was a lie, then you know exactly what I felt in that moment. Hit that subscribe button if you're still with me, because what happened next changed everything about who I thought I was. The morning moved forward like a runaway train. I let Jessica and the other girls fuss over my hair and makeup, sitting silently in the chair while they transformed me into the perfect bride. The makeup artist, a sweet woman named Patricia, kept commenting on how serene I looked. "Some brides are bouncing off the walls by now," she said as she applied my lipstick. "But you're so calm. That's the sign of a woman who knows she's making the right choice." If only she knew. While Patricia worked on my face, I watched the clock. Emma had said David was going to call off the wedding this morning. It was already 10 a.m., and the ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. When was he planning to drop this bomb? After I was already in my dress? After the guests had arrived? What was his timeline for destroying my life? My mother fluttered around the room, taking pictures of everything, her face glowing with maternal pride. She kept talking about how perfect everything was going to be, how David was such a good man, how lucky I was to have found someone who loved me so much. Each word was like a knife twisting in my chest. At 11 a.m., David finally called. "Can I come over? I need to talk to you about something important." My heart was hammering, but I kept my voice steady. "You know you're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. Caroline, please. It's important." There it was. The moment Emma had warned me about. But instead of falling apart, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. A clarity I'd never experienced before. "Okay," I said. "But I'm in the middle of getting ready. Can you give me an hour?" Yes. "Okay. I'll be there at noon." Perfect. That gave me exactly 60 minutes to prepare for the conversation that was supposed to devastate me. Except David had no idea that I already knew what was coming. Emma's confession had given me something precious, the element of surprise. While the hairstylist worked on my updo, I started making mental notes. David owned a successful pharmaceutical consulting firm that he'd built from scratch. His reputation in our small town was spotless, the successful businessman who'd won the heart of the local doctor. He was proud of that reputation, maybe even more proud of it than he was of our relationship. Emma worked as a freelance graphic designer, mostly living off our parents' support and the occasional project. She'd never been financially independent, never had to face real consequences for her choices. She floated through life assuming someone would always be there to catch her when she fell. They'd both made a choice to betray me, but they'd also made the choice to keep it secret until the very last moment. They wanted to have their affair and avoid the consequences for as long as possible. They wanted me to be the fool who didn't see it coming. But what if I wasn't the fool? What if I was the one with the plan? "Caroline, honey, you're gripping that champagne glass awfully tight," my mother said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I looked down and realized I was white-knuckling the mimosa Jessica had given me an hour ago. I forced my fingers to relax and set the glass aside. "Sorry, Mom. Just thinking." "About what, sweetheart?" "About revenge," I thought. About making sure that David and Emma's betrayal cost them something real. About making sure I wasn't the only one who suffered today. But I smiled at my mother and said, "About how much I love you." Her eyes filled with tears, and she kissed my forehead. "Oh, Caroline, you're going to be such a beautiful bride." At 11:45, I asked everyone to give me 15 minutes alone to collect my thoughts before David arrived. I waited until I heard their voices downstairs in the kitchen, then I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, I called my cousin Marcus, who worked for the local newspaper. Marcus had always had a crush on me, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped his daughter with her college applications. Marcus, it's Caroline. I need a photographer at my wedding today, but not for the reasons you think. Can you be here by 1:30? And bring someone from the society page. I have a feeling this is going to be a story worth telling. Next, I called David's business partner, James Morrison. James had been trying to buy David out of their company for months, but David had always refused. James, it's Caroline. Are you still interested in purchasing David's share of the business? I think he might be more motivated to sell than you think. Can you come to the wedding today? As my guest. Finally, I called my lawyer, Rebecca Stone. Rebecca had handled my student loan negotiations and would be drawing up our prenup after the honeymoon. Rebecca, I need you at my house in 30 minutes. And bring a recording device. I have a feeling I'm about to need documentation of a conversation. By the time David's car pulled into our driveway at exactly noon, I was ready. I was still in my robe and curlers, looking like a bride in the middle of getting ready, but inside I was someone else entirely. Someone who was about to take control of her own story. I watched from my bedroom window as David sat in his car for 5 full minutes before getting out. He was gathering his courage, I realized. Preparing himself to break my heart. How thoughtful. When he finally walked up to the front door, I was waiting in the living room, surrounded by all the decorations for our reception, all the flowers that spelled out our love story, all the photographs of our relationship that my mother had arranged on every surface. David looked around at all of it, and I saw something flicker in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But not enough of either to stop what was coming. Caroline, he said, and his voice was already shaking. We need to talk. I sat down on the couch, folding my hands in my lap like the perfect, trusting fiancé I'd been that morning. Of course. What's on your mind? He started pacing, running his hands through his hair, and I realized he'd practiced this speech. He'd probably stood in front of his bathroom mirror this morning, rehearsing how to destroy me. I don't know how to say this. Just say it, David. He stopped pacing and looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. The man I'd planned to spend my life with. The man I'd trusted with my whole heart. Then he opened his mouth and proved that man had never really existed. I can't marry you, Caroline. 5 words. 5 simple words that were supposed to shatter my world. David stood there in my living room, surrounded by our engagement photos and wedding decorations, and delivered the line he'd been rehearsing while I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap like I was listening to a weather report. I can't marry you, he repeated when I didn't respond. I'm so sorry, but there's someone else. I tilted my head slightly, like I was trying to process what he was saying. Someone else. David's face crumpled with what looked like genuine anguish. If I didn't know better, I might have felt sorry for him. Caroline, I never meant for this to happen. You have to believe me. But I've fallen in love with someone else. Who? The question hung in the air between us. I watched him struggle with it, watched him realize that this was the part of his speech he hadn't quite figured out yet. How do you tell your fiancée that you're leaving her for her own sister? It's God, Caroline, it's Emma. I let my mouth fall open. Let my eyes widen. Let my hands tremble just enough to be believable. Emma. My Emma. It wasn't supposed to happen. We tried to stop it, we both tried, but we love each other. You love each other. I repeated his words slowly, like I was testing how they tasted. For how long? 3 months. 3 months. Another slow repetition. So when you proposed to me at Christmas, when you were picking out wedding venues with me, when you were making love to me. I let my voice break just a little. You were also making love to my sister. David flinched like I'd slapped him. Caroline, please. Where? What? Where did this happen? In your apartment? In her apartment? In our bed? Caroline, don't do this to yourself. In our bed, David? The bed where I've been sleeping next to you, trusting you, loving you, for 3 months while you were fucking my sister. He'd never heard me use that word before. In 4 years together, I'd never spoken to him with that kind of raw anger, and I saw him physically recoil from it. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I stood up now, and I let everything I was feeling show on my face. The betrayal, the rage, the heartbreak. But underneath all of that, there was something else. Something cold and calculating that David was too focused on his own guilt to notice. Tell me what it was like, David. I want to understand how my fiancé and my sister fell in love behind my back. Caroline, I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. You are hurting me. Right now, 2 hours before our wedding, with 300 guests about to arrive, you're telling me that everything I believed about my life was a lie. David started crying then. Actual tears rolling down his cheeks as he looked at me with something that might have been love, or might just have been regret. I know I'm a terrible person. I know I've destroyed everything. But Caroline, I can't marry you when I'm in love with someone else. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. Fair. I laughed, and it was a sound I'd never made before. Bitter and sharp and completely foreign to my own ears. You're worried about being fair now. I tried to tell you sooner. I wanted to tell you weeks ago, but I couldn't find the right time. The right time? David, there is no right time to tell someone their entire life is built on a lie. But you know what would have been better than 2 hours before our wedding? 3 months ago, when you first decided you wanted to fuck my sister instead of me. He winced again at my language, and I realized that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted him uncomfortable. I wanted him to see a side of me he'd never seen before. I wanted him to understand that the woman he thought he knew, the sweet, understanding, forgiving Caroline, was gone. What happens now? I asked, and my voice was eerily calm again. I don't know. Emma and I, we want to be together, but we know it's going to be complicated. With the family, with everyone who knows us. Complicated. Another laugh. Yes, I imagine it will be complicated when everyone finds out that you left your fiancée at the altar for her younger sister. David's face went pale. Caroline, you don't have to tell people like that. We could say we realized we weren't compatible, or that we wanted different things. We could lie, you mean? We could be kind. I stared at him for a long moment, this man I'd planned to spend my life with, and felt something final settle in my chest. You want me to be kind? After everything you've done to me, you want me to protect your reputation. I want you to protect yourself too. Caroline, if people know the real reason, it's going to hurt you more than it hurts us. And there it was. The assumption that I was weak. That I was the victim who needed to hide in shame while they got to be the star-crossed lovers who couldn't help themselves. David, I said softly, I need you to leave now. Caroline. Leave. Now. Before I say something we'll both regret. He nodded and started toward the door, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, I did love you. I do love you. Just, not the way I love her. After he left, I sat alone in that living room for exactly 3 minutes. Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom, where Rebecca Stone was waiting with a digital recorder and a very satisfied expression. Did you get all of that? Every word, Rebecca said. And Caroline? I've been doing family law for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that with such composure. I'm not done yet. I called downstairs to my mother. Mom, can you ask everyone to come up here? I need to talk to the whole bridal party. 5 minutes later, my bedroom was crowded with women in various states of wedding preparation. Jessica in her bridesmaid dress, my cousins in their heels and jewelry, my mother with tears already forming in her eyes because she could sense something was wrong, and Patricia the makeup artist looking confused but polite. And standing in the doorway, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor, was Emma. "I have an announcement," I said, and my voice carried clearly through the room. "The wedding is off." The explosion of questions and gasps and "what do you mean?" filled the air, but I held up my hand for silence. David just left. He's calling off the wedding because he's been having an affair for the past 3 months. I paused and looked directly at Emma. With Emma. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the clock ticking on my nightstand. My mother's face went through about 6 different emotions before settling on something I'd never seen before. Not anger. Exactly. Something colder. "Emma," she said, and her voice was deadly quiet. "Is this true?" Emma opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "Answer me." "Mom, yes. But it's not what you think." "What I think," my mother said, standing up slowly, "is that you betrayed your sister in the worst possible way. What I think is that you've been lying to all of us for months while we planned this wedding. What I think is that you are no longer welcome in this house." "Mom. Get out. Mom, please. Get out." I'd never heard my mother yell like that before. None of us had. Emma stumbled backward like she'd been physically pushed, tears streaming down her face, and ran from the room. Jessica sank into a chair, her face white with shock. "Caroline, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." "Neither can I said. "But it is happening. And now we get to decide what happens next." I looked around the room at all these women who loved me, who had spent their morning getting ready to celebrate my happiness, and I felt something I hadn't expected: power. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I felt like I was in control. "The guests will start arriving in 2 hours, I continued. "We have food, flowers, music, and 300 people expecting a wedding. I say we give them one." My mother frowned. "Caroline, sweetheart, what do you mean?" I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that revenge didn't have to be a dish served cold. Sometimes it could be served at exactly 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, in front of everyone who mattered. "I mean, we're going to have a wedding. Just not the one anyone was expecting." What I want you to understand is that I wasn't thinking about revenge in that moment. I was thinking about survival. I was thinking about dignity. I was thinking about taking back control of a story that David and Emma had been writing behind my back for 3 months. And if you're sitting there thinking I was crazy, if you're wondering how someone goes from heartbroken to strategic in the span of an hour, let me ask you this. Have you ever been so thoroughly betrayed that your only choice was to become someone completely different? Because that's what was happening to me. The old Caroline, the trusting, forgiving, accommodating Caroline, had died the moment David said he couldn't marry me. What was left was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. After Emma ran out and my mother stopped shaking with rage, I sat down with the remaining women in my bedroom and laid out my plan. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "In 1 hour, I'm going to get into my wedding dress. In 2 hours, I'm going to walk down that aisle. And when the minister asks if anyone objects to this union, we're going to find out just how much David and Emma really love each other." Jessica stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Caroline, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "But honey," my mother said gently, "David already called off the wedding. He's not going to show up." I pulled out my phone and showed them the series of text messages I'd been sending while they were processing Emma's exile. "To David, I've been thinking about what you said. Can we please talk before you make any final decisions? I love you so much. Please don't give up on us." To David, I know I reacted badly, but I was just shocked. "Maybe we can work through this together." To David, "Please, David. Don't let Emma come between us. We can fix this." And his responses. "Caroline, I'm so sorry, but my mind is made up. This isn't about Emma coming between us. I love her. I can't fake feelings I don't have anymore." Then I showed them the message I'd sent 5 minutes ago. You're right. I can't compete with Emma. But I need closure. I need to end this properly, in front of our families. Will you at least give me that? One last conversation before we tell everyone. His response had come immediately, of course. I owe you that much. I'll be there at 2. His coming, I said. He thinks he's being noble, giving me the closure I need. He has no idea what he's walking into. My cousin Beth, who had been quiet through all of this, finally spoke up. Caroline, what exactly are you planning to do? I stood up and walked to my closet, pulling out the wedding dress that had been waiting for me all morning. The dress I'd chosen with Emma's help 6 months ago, back when I thought my sister wanted me to be happy. I'm planning to get married, I said. Just not to David. The room erupted in confused questions, but I held up my hand again. Marcus is going to be here with a photographer and a reporter. James Morrison is coming as my guest. He's David's business partner and has been wanting to buy David out for months. Rebecca Stone is already here, and she's got David's confession recorded. By the time this day is over, everyone in this town is going to know exactly what David Chen and Emma Mitchell are capable of. But Caroline, Jessica said, that's not going to bring David back. That's not going to fix this. I looked at her, and I realized she still didn't understand. I don't want David back, Jess. I want him destroyed. The words hung in the air, and I saw my mother flinch. The woman who raised me had never heard me speak with that kind of cold calculation before. Sweetheart, she said carefully, you're hurt. You're angry. But this isn't who you are. No, Mom. This is exactly who I am. This is who I am when people I love stab me in the back and expect me to quietly disappear so they can be happy. I started taking off my robe, signaling to Patricia that it was time to get me into my dress. David thinks he's going to show up here, have one final conversation with his heartbroken ex-fiancé, and then ride off into the sunset with Emma while everyone whispers about poor Caroline who got left at the altar. But that's not how this story ends. Patricia began helping me step into the dress, her hands shaking slightly as she worked with the buttons. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as the reality of what I was doing settled over the room. What story are you writing instead? Beth asked quietly. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror as Patricia fastened the last button. The dress fit perfectly, just like it had at all the fittings. The woman looking back at me was everything I'd dreamed of being on my wedding day, except for the expression in her eyes. There was something in my eyes that had never been there before. Something sharp and unforgiving. I'm writing the story where Caroline Mitchell doesn't get destroyed by other people's betrayal. I'm writing the story where she fights back. My mother stood up and walked over to me, placing the veil carefully on my head. Her hands were gentle, but her expression was troubled. Caroline, I need you to really think about this. Whatever you're planning, it's going to change you. And once you do it, you can't undo it. I met her eyes in the mirror. Mom, they already changed me. David and Emma already turned me into someone I don't recognize. The only question now is whether I'm going to be the woman who got destroyed by their betrayal, or the woman who survived it. She was quiet for a long moment, then she picked up my grandmother's pearl necklace from the dresser and fastened it around my neck. Then let's make sure you survive it. At 1:30, Marcus arrived with his camera equipment and a woman I didn't recognize from the newspaper. I met them at the back door, fully dressed, and watched their expressions change as they realized this wasn't going to be a typical wedding story. Caroline, Marcus said carefully, what exactly are we here to document? The truth, I said. About David Chen and Emma Mitchell. About what happens when people think they can betray someone without consequences. The reporter, whose name was Angela, pulled out a recording device. And you want this on the record? I want everything on the record. At 1:45, James Morrison arrived, looking confused but intrigued. I met him in the front hallway and explained the situation in the most clinical terms I could manage. David is going to be emotionally compromised today, I told him. His reputation in this town is about to be destroyed, and his relationship with his family is going to be complicated. If you're still interested in buying him out, today might be the day he's motivated to sell." James's eyebrows rose. "Caroline, are you sure you want to be thinking about business right now?" "I'm thinking about everything right now, James. Including the fact that David is about to need money, and you're about to have leverage." At 2 p.m. exactly, I was standing at the back of the property where our ceremony was set up. 300 guests were seated in white chairs arranged in perfect rows, facing an altar decorated with white roses and baby's breath. The string quartet was playing the songs David and I had chosen together, and everyone was dressed in their wedding best, holding their programs and waiting for the bride to make her entrance. At 2:01, David's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from behind a tree as he got out, straightened his tie, and walked toward the backyard with the expression of a man who was about to do something difficult but necessary. He was wearing the tuxedo we'd picked out together, and for just a moment, I felt a stab of the old heartbreak. Then I remembered the recording device in Rebecca's briefcase, and the newspaper reporter standing next to the altar, and the way he'd looked at me when he said he loved Emma more than he loved me. David reached the altar and spoke quietly to Pastor Williams, probably explaining that there was going to be a change of plans. I saw the minister's face change from confusion to concern to something that might have been disapproval. That's when I stepped out from behind the tree and began walking down the aisle. I'd practiced this walk a dozen times during rehearsals, but it had never felt like this. Every step was deliberate. Every breath was calculated. The guests turned to look at me, their faces lighting up with joy and admiration, completely unaware that they were about to witness something entirely different than what they'd come to see. David's face when he saw me walking toward him was everything I'd hoped for. Shock, confusion, and something that might have been panic. He started to step forward, probably to intercept me before I reached the altar, but Pastor Williams placed a hand on his arm. I could hear the murmur starting in the crowd. People whispering to each other, wondering why the groom looked like he'd seen a ghost, wondering why there was a reporter with a camera positioned at the front of the ceremony. When I reached the altar, I turned to face our 300 guests, David's business associates, our college friends, both our extended families, everyone who mattered in our small Georgia town. Everyone who would remember this day for the rest of their lives. "Thank you all for coming," I said, and my voice carried clearly across the yard without a microphone. "I know you're here to witness a wedding, and I promise you're going to see something you'll never forget." David grabbed my arm. "Caroline, what are you doing?" I smiled at him, the same smile I'd given him every morning for 4 years. "I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, David. I'm giving you closure." I turned back to the crowd. "Before we begin, I think there's something you all should know about the man I was supposed to marry today." The silence that fell over our wedding guests was so complete I could hear the wind rustling through the oak trees at the edge of our property. 300 people dressed in their finest clothes, holding programs with our names printed in elegant script, waiting for me to explain why their beautiful Saturday afternoon was about to turn into something else entirely. David's hand was still on my arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. "Caroline, please. Don't do this." I looked at him, and for just a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. The man who held me when I cried after losing my first patient. The man who promised me forever and meant it, or at least I thought he did. Then I remembered Emma's voice saying I love him in present tense, and that moment of softness vanished. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the crowd again, "my name is Caroline Mitchell, and I was supposed to become Caroline Chen today. But it turns out that the man standing next to me has been having an affair with my sister for the past 3 months." The gasp that rose from the crowd was audible. I watched as people turned to look at each other, processing what I'd just said. In the 3rd row, David's mother covered her mouth with her hands. In the 5th row, my college roommate Sarah stared at me with wide, shocked eyes. "Caroline, stop," David hissed, but his voice was shaking now. "2 hours ago," I continued, "David came to my house and told me he couldn't marry me because he was in love with someone else. That someone else is my 28-year-old sister Emma, who was supposed to be sitting right there in the front row as part of my wedding party." I gestured to the empty chair where Emma should have been sitting, decorated with a white ribbon and a single rose. Now, I want you all to understand something, I said, and I could feel my voice getting stronger with every word. I could have quietly called off this wedding. I could have made up some story about cold feet or incompatibility. I could have protected David's reputation and my own pride by keeping this private. David's face had gone completely white. Caroline, please. But then I realized something, I said, raising my voice slightly so everyone could hear. Why should I protect people who didn't protect me? Why should I preserve the reputations of people who spent 3 months lying to my face while they betrayed me in the worst possible way? In the crowd, I could see people pulling out their phones. This was going to be all over social media before the reception food even got cold. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Georgia was going to know David Chen's name, and not for the reasons he'd always imagined. So here's what we're going to do instead, I announced. We're going to have complete honesty. David, would you like to tell everyone here how the affair started? I'm not doing this, David said, but his voice was barely a whisper. That's fine. I'll tell them. I turned back to the crowd. It started 3 months ago when David came to help move furniture for my mother's birthday party. I was at the hospital performing emergency surgery on a 6-year-old with a congenital heart defect, saving someone's child's life, while my fiancé and my sister were falling in love in my childhood home. I heard someone in the crowd make a sound of disgust. Good. For 3 months, while I planned our wedding, while I picked out flowers and tasted cakes and addressed invitations, while I lay in bed next to this man every night believing we were building a life together, he was texting my sister. Meeting my sister. Making promises to my sister. David tried to walk away from the altar, but Pastor William stepped slightly to the side, effectively blocking his path. The minister's face was grim but determined. He'd known our family for 20 years, had baptized both Emma and me, and I could see the disappointment and anger in his expression. Tell me, David, I said, turning to face him directly, when you were making love to me, were you thinking about her? When you told me you couldn't wait to start our family, were you planning to start it with Emma instead? Stop. His voice broke on the word. Caroline, I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. For 3 months, it happened. And the only reason you're telling me now is because you finally got caught, or because Emma finally gave you an ultimatum. Which was it, David? He didn't answer, but I saw the truth in his face. It was Emma, wasn't it? She got tired of being the secret. She wanted to be the girlfriend instead of the other woman. So she made you choose Caroline. And you chose her. The words hung in the air between us, and I saw something crumble in David's expression. Maybe it was his last hope that this could somehow be salvaged, or maybe it was just his dignity. But whatever it was, I watched it die. Yes, he said finally. I chose her. The crowd was completely silent now, but I could feel their energy shifting. What had started as shock was turning into something else. Anger, maybe, or disgust. These people had known David for years. They'd watched him build his business, seen him as a pillar of the community. They'd respected him. That respect was evaporating in real time. And Emma chose you, I said. My sister, who I've protected and supported and loved my entire life, chose to betray me for a man she'd known for 4 years. A man who belonged to someone else. I looked out at the crowd and found Emma's best friend, Lisa, sitting in the 7th row with tears streaming down her face. Lisa, you've been Emma's friend since high school. Did you know about this? Lisa shook her head frantically. Caroline, I had no idea. I swear I had no idea. Of course you didn't. Because Emma is very good at keeping secrets when it serves her purposes. Just like David is very good at lying when it benefits him. I turned back to David, who was now staring at the ground like he wanted it to swallow him whole. Here's what I find most interesting about all of this, I said. This morning, when you came to break up with me, you asked me to be kind. You wanted me to help you create a cover story that would protect both your reputations. You wanted me to lie for you, David. Even after everything you'd done to me, you expected me to help you avoid the consequences. David looked up at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in his face before: fear. Caroline, I know you're hurt. I'm not hurt, David. I'm done. I'm done being the woman who makes excuses for people who betray her. I'm done being the sister who protects Emma from her own choices. I'm done being the fiancé who puts everyone else's comfort ahead of her own dignity. I could see Marcus in my peripheral vision, his camera capturing every moment of this. Angela, the reporter, was scribbling notes furiously. James Morrison was watching with the expression of a man who was calculating exactly how much David's desperation was going to cost him. But here's the thing, I continued, and now I was talking directly to David again. You made a mistake when you decided to betray me. You thought I was weak. You thought I was the kind of woman who would quietly disappear so you could have your happily ever after with my sister. You thought wrong. David's phone started buzzing in his pocket. Probably Emma, wondering where he was, wondering why he wasn't answering her texts. Aren't you going to answer that? I asked sweetly. It's probably your girlfriend, wondering why her boyfriend is taking so long to officially dump his fiancée. David pulled out his phone, looked at the screen, and I watched the color drain from his face completely. What's wrong, David? Is Emma getting impatient? He looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine fear. Caroline, Emma's at the hospital. Something's wrong. For just a moment, the old Caroline surfaced. The sister who had always protected Emma, always put her family first, always rushed to help when someone was in trouble. Then I remembered standing under the oak tree this morning, listening to Emma tell me she was in love with my fiancé. I remembered the 3 months of lies, the 3 months of betrayal, the 3 months of planning my wedding while they planned their affair. That's not my problem anymore, I said. And I meant it. David stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. Caroline, she's your sister. She was my sister. Right up until this morning when she decided that sleeping with my fiancé was more important than our relationship. David's phone kept buzzing. Text after text after text, and I could see his panic growing with each notification. Whatever was happening with Emma, it was serious enough to make David forget that he was currently being humiliated in front of 300 people. Caroline, please. Whatever you think of me, whatever you think of what we did, Emma needs help. Then go help her. I can't just leave. Why not? You've been planning to leave anyway. You've been planning to leave for 3 months, David. This is just a different exit than you imagined. But even as I said the words, I could see something was genuinely wrong. David's hands were shaking as he looked at his phone, and his face had gone from pale to grey. What happened? I asked, and I hated myself for caring. She took something. Pills. Lisa found her in her apartment and called an ambulance. Lisa. Emma's best friend Lisa, who was sitting in the 7th row with tears streaming down her face. I looked at her, and she was staring at her own phone with horror. She texted me 20 minutes ago, Lisa called out. She said she couldn't live with what she'd done. She said everyone was going to hate her and it was all her fault and she was sorry. The crowd had gone completely silent again, but this silence was different. This was a silence of people witnessing something that had gone from scandalous to genuinely tragic. And I felt nothing. I should have felt panic. I should have felt fear for my sister's safety. I should have been running to my car to get to the hospital. But standing there in my wedding dress, surrounded by the ruins of the life I'd planned, I felt absolutely nothing for Emma. Go, I said to David. Go to her. Caroline. Go to her, David. She's your girlfriend now. She's your responsibility. David looked at me for one long moment, and I think he was trying to find some trace of the woman he'd been with for 4 years. The woman who would have forgiven him eventually. The woman who would have put Emma's needs ahead of her own anger. That woman was gone. He ran. I watched David push through the crowd, stumbling over chairs and decorations in his desperation to get to his car. I watched him drive away from our wedding, still wearing his tuxedo, leaving me standing at the altar in front of 300 people who didn't know whether to stay or go or call someone for help. Pastor Williams stepped up beside me. "Caroline, are you all right?" I looked at him, this man who had known me since I was 7 years old, who had watched me grow up in this church, who had been planning to pronounce David and me husband and wife just minutes ago. "I'm perfect," I said, and I meant it. "Child, your sister is in the hospital." My sister made her choice. She chose David over me, and David chose her over me, and now they get to live with the consequences of that choice. "But Caroline," Pastor Williams, "I need you to understand something. I am not responsible for Emma's guilt. I am not responsible for her shame. I am not responsible for fixing the mess that she and David created when they decided to betray me." I turned to face the crowd again, all these people who had come to celebrate my happiness and instead witnessed the complete destruction of the life I'd planned. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here today. I know this isn't what you expected when you got dressed up and drove out here to celebrate love and commitment and happily ever after." I could see people shifting in their seats, unsure whether they should leave or stay or applaud or what the appropriate response was to this situation. But I want you to know that you've given me something precious today. You've given me witnesses. You've given me people who saw exactly what David Chen and Emma Mitchell are capable of. And now, when they try to rewrite this story, when they try to make themselves the victims and me the villain, you'll know the truth. Marcus was still taking pictures, capturing every moment of this. By evening, this story would be everywhere. By tomorrow, everyone in our small Georgia town would know that David Chen and Emma Mitchell had destroyed Caroline Mitchell's wedding day. But more importantly, they'd know that Caroline Mitchell had survived it. I also want you to know that the reception is still happening. We have food and music and an open bar, and I'll be damned if I let their betrayal ruin a perfectly good party. A few people in the crowd actually smiled at that. So if you'd like to stay and celebrate with me, not my marriage, but my freedom, you're more than welcome. And if you'd rather go home and process what you've just witnessed, I understand that too. I started to walk back down the aisle, but then I stopped and turned around one more time. Oh, and one more thing. If anyone here is thinking about having an affair with their partner's sibling, maybe think twice. Because as you can see, secrets have a way of coming out at the worst possible times. I walked back down the aisle alone, my grandmother's veil trailing behind me, my head held high. And about halfway back, something amazing happened. People started clapping. It started with just one person, my cousin Beth, I think, but it spread through the crowd like wildfire. By the time I reached the back of the ceremony area, 300 people were on their feet, giving me a standing ovation. Not for getting married. For surviving the attempt. Back at the house, about half the wedding guests had followed me to what was supposed to be our reception. The caterers had already set up the tables and the band was tuned and ready, so I made an executive decision. "Change of plans," I announced to the crowd. "We're not celebrating a marriage today. We're celebrating independence." The DJ, looking confused but game, started playing I Will Survive and people actually started dancing. My mother found me by the cake table, the 3-tiered vanilla and raspberry cake that David and I had tasted 6 different versions of before choosing this one. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" I looked at her, this woman who had raised me to be kind and forgiving and accommodating, and realized that she was looking at me with something I'd never seen before, pride. "I'm angry, Mom. I'm furious and heartbroken and I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. But you know what I don't feel?" "What?" "I don't feel sorry for them. Not for David, and not for Emma. They made their choices, and now they get to live with them." My mother nodded slowly. "Good. Because they don't deserve your sympathy." Around us, people were eating our wedding food and drinking our wedding wine and dancing to our wedding music. But instead of celebrating David and Caroline, they were celebrating the fact that Caroline had refused to be destroyed by David. It wasn't the wedding I'd planned, but it was exactly the wedding I needed. James Morrison found me around sunset, when the party was starting to wind down and people were beginning to say their goodbyes. Caroline, he said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you heard from David? No. And I don't expect to. Well, I thought you should know. He called me about an hour ago. He wants to sell his share of the company. Immediately. I smiled. And I'm prepared to offer him considerably less than what we discussed this morning. His reputation in this town is, well, it's not what it was this morning. That's not my concern anymore, James. No, but it might interest you to know that he's desperate enough to take whatever I offer. Apparently, he needs money for lawyers and medical bills and a fresh start somewhere else. I thought about that for a moment. David, who had been so proud of the business he'd built, so proud of his standing in the community, now forced to sell everything and start over because of choices he'd made. James, I said, whatever you pay him, make sure it's exactly what he deserves. Not a penny more. I intend to. As the last of the guests were leaving, Jessica helped me out of my wedding dress and into a simple sundress. We sat on my childhood bed, surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Caroline, she said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Are you really as okay as you seem? Because what happened today, it would destroy most people. And you're sitting here like you just won the lottery. I thought about her question seriously. Was I okay? I was definitely not the same person I'd been this morning. The old Caroline, the one who would have quietly cancelled the wedding and spent months trying to forgive David and Emma, was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes the people you love most are the ones who hurt you worst. I'm not okay, I said finally. But I'm not destroyed either. And right now, that feels like enough. What I didn't tell Jessica, what I wasn't ready to admit even to myself, was that part of me was grateful. Grateful that I'd found out who David really was before I married him. Grateful that I'd learned what Emma was capable of before I spent any more years protecting her from consequences. Grateful that I'd discovered I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Caroline, this is Rebecca Stone. I wanted you to know that David's confession is now part of the public record. Also, based on what happened today, I think we should discuss some legal options regarding the financial losses from the cancelled wedding. Call me when you're ready. I smiled and set the phone aside. Tomorrow, I would start rebuilding my life. Tomorrow, I would figure out what came next for the new Caroline Mitchell. But tonight, I was going to sleep in my childhood bed, in the house where I'd grown up believing that love meant forgiveness and family meant loyalty. Now I knew better. And somehow, that felt like freedom. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and a voicemail box so full it wouldn't accept new messages. The story had spread faster than I'd expected, even for a small Georgia town where gossip traveled at the speed of light. The first call I returned was to my mother, who had spent the night at her sister's house because she couldn't bear to be in the same house where David had confessed his betrayal. How are you feeling, sweetheart? She asked, and I could hear the worry in her voice. Different, I said honestly. But not bad different. The phone's been ringing all morning. Reporters. Mostly. Word got out about what happened yesterday. I wasn't surprised. Marcus had done exactly what I'd asked him to do, and Angela's story was probably already online. By now, the whole state of Georgia knew about David Chen and Emma Mitchell and the wedding that became a public confession. What are you telling them? That my daughter is stronger than anyone ever imagined, including herself. I smiled at that. Mom, have you heard anything about Emma? There was a long pause. She's stable. Lisa called this morning. The doctors say she's going to be fine, physically. Physically. The word hung between us, loaded with all the things we weren't saying about Emma's mental state, about the guilt and shame that had driven her to swallow a bottle of pills. And David. No one's heard from David. After I hung up with my mother, I sat in my childhood bed and scrolled through the text messages. Most were from friends and family, expressing shock and support. Some were from people I barely knew, offering congratulations for standing up for myself. A few were from strangers who had somehow gotten my number, wanting details about the story. But there was one message that stopped me cold. From David: Caroline, I know you never want to hear from me again, but I need you to know that Emma is asking for you. She won't talk to anyone else. She keeps saying your name. I stared at that message for a long time. Emma, lying in a hospital bed, asking for the sister she'd betrayed. The sister whose life she'd helped destroy. The sister who had refused to come to her aid when she needed help. The old Caroline would have been in the car already, racing to the hospital with flowers and forgiveness and a heart full of guilt for not being there when her family needed her. The new Caroline deleted the message without responding. I got dressed and drove into town, partly because I needed groceries and partly because I was curious to see how people would react to me now. The story of yesterday's wedding had to be all over social media by now, and I wanted to know what people were saying. The first person I ran into was Mrs. Henderson from the bank, who had known our family for 20 years. Caroline, honey, she said, rushing up to me in the grocery store parking lot, I heard about what happened yesterday. Are you all right? I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you for asking. That David Chen should be ashamed of himself. And your sister. She shook her head. I just can't believe it. After everything your family has done for that girl. I realized this was going to be my life now. People approaching me with sympathy and outrage, wanting to talk about David and Emma, wanting to know how I was coping with the betrayal. People make choices, I said simply. David and Emma made theirs. Inside the grocery store, I could feel people staring. Not maliciously, but curiously. I was Caroline Mitchell, the woman who had turned her own wedding into a public trial. I was the woman who had refused to be quietly destroyed by betrayal. I was famous, at least locally. The cashier, a young woman I didn't recognize, looked at me with something that might have been admiration. Are you Caroline Mitchell? She asked. Yes. I saw the video online. Wow. That was incredible. Video. Of course there was a video. Someone had recorded yesterday's confrontation and posted it online. I wondered how many people had seen it, how far the story had spread. Thank you, I said, not sure what else to say. My ex cheated on me too, she continued, scanning my groceries. I wish I'd had the guts to do what you did. After I left the grocery store, I sat in my car and finally looked up the video. Someone had posted it on TikTok with the caption "Bride exposes cheating fiancé at wedding." It had 2.3 million views. I watched myself standing at that altar, calmly and methodically destroying David's reputation while 300 people watched in stunned silence. I watched David's face crumble as I forced him to confess his affair in front of everyone who mattered to him. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Hundreds of people praising me for my strength, for refusing to be a victim, for serving justice publicly. A few criticized me for being cruel, for humiliating David when he was already suffering. I closed the app and drove home. That afternoon, Rebecca Stone came over with a folder full of legal documents and a very satisfied expression. Caroline, I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like what you did yesterday. Is that good or bad? It's brilliant. David's public confession yesterday made my job incredibly easy. We can pursue damages for the wedding expenses, emotional distress, and the financial impact of his breach of contract. She spread the documents across my kitchen table. David's attorney called this morning. They want to settle out of court. How much? Enough to pay for the wedding 3 times over, plus compensatory damages for your pain and suffering. I looked at the settlement offer and felt a surge of satisfaction. David was paying for his betrayal in the most literal sense possible. There's something else, Rebecca continued. James Morrison called. He wants you to know that he purchased David's share of the company for about 30 cents on the dollar. David was desperate to sell, and his reputation made him a liability. So David had lost his fiancé, his business, his standing in the community, and now most of his money. All because he couldn't keep his promises. What about Emma? I asked. Rebecca's expression grew more serious. Emma's situation is more complicated. She's been placed on psychiatric hold, and there's talk of pressing charges related to the prescription pills she took. But more importantly, she's lost her job. Her job. She was working as a freelance designer for Morrison Pharmaceuticals. James fired her yesterday after he found out about her role in all this. So Emma had lost her sister, her job, her reputation, and nearly her life. All for a man who was now probably wishing he'd never met either of us. That evening, my phone rang. It was Lisa, Emma's best friend. Caroline, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm calling about Emma. How is she? She's not good. The doctors say she's physically stable, but mentally. Caroline, she's asking for you constantly. She won't eat, won't sleep, just keeps saying your name. I felt a flicker of the old sympathy, quickly suppressed. Lisa, I can't help her. She's your sister. She was my sister. Right up until she decided that destroying my life was worth it for a man she barely knew. Caroline, please. I know what she did was horrible, but she's genuinely sorry. She's devastated by what happened. She's devastated by the consequences, Lisa. There's a difference. There was a long pause. The Emma I know would never have done something like this. She loved you so much. No, I interrupted. The Emma you know is exactly the kind of person who would do something like this. You just never wanted to see it. None of us did. After I hung up, I sat alone in my kitchen and thought about Emma lying in that hospital bed, asking for me. Part of me wanted to feel guilty for not going to her. Part of me wanted to feel like a bad sister, a bad person, for abandoning my family when they needed me. But I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. For the first time in my life, I was not responsible for cleaning up Emma's mess. I was not responsible for protecting her from the consequences of her choices. I was not responsible for being the bigger person, the understanding sister, the one who always forgave. My phone buzzed with another text from David. Caroline, please. I know I have no right to ask, but Emma needs you. She needs her sister. I typed back, Emma needed her sister 3 months ago when she decided to sleep with my fiancé. She needed her sister this morning when she chose to confess on my wedding day instead of weeks ago. She needed her sister when she was making every single choice that led to this moment. She doesn't get to need me now. David's response came immediately. I understand why you hate me, but don't punish Emma for my mistakes. Your mistakes? David, Emma is a grown woman who made her own choices. She chose to betray me. She chose to lie to me for 3 months. She chose to destroy my wedding day. Those weren't your mistakes. Those were hers. She loves you, Caroline. She's always loved you. No, David. She loved the idea of me. She loved having a sister who would always forgive her, always protect her, always put her needs first. She never loved me enough to consider how her actions would affect me. I blocked his number after that. That night, I made a list of everything I needed to do to rebuild my life. Cancel the honeymoon. Return the wedding gifts. Figure out what to do with the dress. Start dating again. Eventually. But at the top of the list, I wrote, remember who I am now. Because the woman who had stood at that altar yesterday, who had calmly and methodically destroyed 2 people who had betrayed her, who had turned her wedding into a public trial, that woman was someone I was still getting to know. But I liked her. She was stronger than the old Caroline. Smarter. Less willing to be taken advantage of. She was someone who demanded better from the people in her life. She was someone who understood that forgiveness had to be earned, not simply expected. She was someone I could respect. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I was genuinely excited to see what she would do next. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Atlanta when I saw Emma for the first time since she ran from my bedroom on my wedding day. She looked terrible. Thinner than I'd ever seen her, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing an oversized sweater that hung off her frame like she'd borrowed it from someone much larger. She saw me at the same moment I saw her, and for a second, we just stared at each other across the crowded cafe. Then she walked over to my table. Caroline. Emma. She gestured to the empty chair across from me. Can I sit? It's a free country. Emma sat down carefully, like she wasn't sure her legs would support her. Up close, she looked even worse. Her skin was pale and blotchy, and her hands were shaking slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. How are you? She asked. I'm excellent, actually. How are you? Emma flinched at the coldness in my voice. I'm not good, Caroline. I haven't been good since you destroyed my wedding. Since I ruined everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Caroline, I need you to know that I never meant for it to happen like that. I never meant for you to find out on your wedding day. When did you mean for me to find out, Emma? After the honeymoon? After David and I had been married for a year? When, exactly, was the right time for me to discover that my sister and my husband were having an affair? I don't know. I thought maybe it would end. I thought maybe we would come to our senses and stop, and you would never have to know. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. You thought you could keep lying to me indefinitely. Caroline, please. I know what I did was unforgivable. You're right. It was unforgivable. So why are you here? Emma's eyes filled with tears. Because you're my sister. Because I love you. Because I can't live with what I've done. Funny. You seem to be living with it just fine for 3 months. No, I wasn't. Caroline, I was dying inside. Every day, every time I saw you planning that wedding, every time you talked about your future with David, I wanted to tell you. But I was a coward. Yes, you were. Emma started crying then, not the pretty tears of a movie heroine but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who had lost everything and was begging for salvation. Caroline, I need you to forgive me. I need my sister back. I can't do this without you. I looked at this woman who had once been the most important person in my world. Emma, who I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework and defended against bullies. Emma, who I'd loved unconditionally for 28 years. Emma, who had repaid that love by sleeping with my fiancé. No, I said simply. Please. No, Emma. I'm not forgiving you. I'm not taking you back. I'm not pretending this never happened so you can feel better about yourself. Caroline, I made a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for 3 months, you made the choice to betray me. That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision. Emma reached across the table like she was going to touch my hand, but I pulled back before she could make contact. Don't. Caroline, what about David? Are you going to punish him forever too? I felt a surge of anger so intense it surprised me. Are you seriously asking me to consider David's feelings right now? After everything? He loves you, Caroline. He's miserable without you. Good. He made a mistake. Stop calling it a mistake. My voice was loud enough that other people in the coffee shop turned to look at us. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is being late for dinner. What you and David did was a betrayal. It was calculated. It was cruel. And it was a choice. Emma shrank back in her chair. I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Emma. Anger would mean I still cared enough about you to feel something. I'm indifferent. That hit her like a physical blow. I could see it in her face, The realization that indifference was so much worse than anger. You can't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Emma, you taught me something important about myself. You taught me that I don't have to accept betrayal just because it comes from family. You taught me that I don't have to forgive people who aren't sorry for what they did, only sorry they got caught. But I am sorry. Are you? Are you sorry you slept with David? Or are you sorry everyone found out? Are you sorry you hurt me? Or are you sorry you lost your job and your reputation and your comfortable life where Big Sister always cleaned up your messes? Emma opened and closed her mouth several times, and I saw the truth in her face. She was sorry about the consequences. She was sorry about the public humiliation, the lost job, the psychiatric hold, the fact that everyone in town now knew what she was capable of. But she wasn't sorry about David. Even now, even sitting across from me begging for forgiveness, she wasn't sorry she'd fallen in love with him. That's what I thought, I said, standing up to leave. Caroline, wait. What about family? What about everything we've been to each other? I looked down at her, this woman who had once been my best friend, my closest confidant, my baby sister who I would have done anything for. Family doesn't betray family, Emma. You stopped being my sister the moment you decided David was more important than I was. So that's it. We're done forever. We're done until you become someone worth forgiving. And frankly, I don't think you're capable of that kind of change. I left Emma crying in that coffee shop and drove back to my new apartment in Atlanta. Yes, I'd moved. I'd taken a job at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, sold my house in our small Georgia town, and started completely over. It turned out that being publicly vindicated for refusing to be a victim had opened some doors for me professionally. Hospitals liked hiring doctors with backbone. My phone rang as I was unlocking my apartment door. The caller ID said David Chen. I'd unblocked his number the week before, partly out of curiosity and partly because I wanted to know if he was still trying to contact me. This was the first time he'd actually called. I answered on the fourth ring. Caroline, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. What do you want, David? I want to explain. I want you to understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted my sister more than you wanted me. What's to explain? It wasn't like that. Caroline, what happened between Emma and me, it wasn't about not wanting you. It was about something I couldn't control. You couldn't control your decision to sleep with my sister. I couldn't control falling in love with her. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Even now, even after everything, David was still choosing Emma over me. He was still making it clear that his love for her was more important than what he'd done to me. How is she? I asked. She's not good, Caroline. She's been in and out of therapy, and she's not working, and she barely leaves her apartment. She keeps talking about you. That's unfortunate for her. Caroline, she needs you. We both need you to forgive us. No, you don't. You need me to absolve you of guilt so you can be happy together. There's a difference. That's not true. David, let me ask you something. If I forgave you both tomorrow, if I gave you my blessing to be together, would you marry Emma? There was a long pause. Caroline. It's a simple question. Would you marry her? Yes. Eventually. Then you don't need my forgiveness. You need my permission. And you're not getting it. Why are you being so cruel? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized that David genuinely didn't understand. He genuinely believed that I was being unreasonably harsh, that I should have moved on by now, that I should be ready to play the role of the understanding ex-fiancé who wished them well. David, I want you to really think about what you just asked me. You want to know why I'm being cruel to the man who betrayed me with my own sister, who lied to me for 3 months, who humiliated me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. You want to know why I'm not nicer to the people who destroyed my wedding, my relationship with my family, and my ability to trust anyone completely. Caroline. I'm not being cruel, David. I'm being honest. And if honesty feels cruel to you, that says something about the kind of person you are. I loved you, Caroline. I still love you, in my own way. No, you don't. You love the idea of being forgiven by me. You love the fantasy where Caroline is so noble and understanding that she gives you her blessing to marry her sister. But you don't love me, David. If you loved me, you never would have touched Emma in the first place. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, David. You taught me that. I hung up on him then, and I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. For 3 weeks, I'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for the guilt to hit, for the regret, for the moment when I would break down and forgive them because it was easier than holding on to anger. But that moment wasn't coming. Because I wasn't holding on to anger. I was holding on to self-respect. That night, I called my mother. Caroline, sweetheart, how are you settling into Atlanta? I'm good, Mom. Really good. I'm so proud of you, you know. The way you've handled all of this, the way you've rebuilt your life. I'm in awe of you. Mom, I saw Emma today. There was a pause. How is she? Not good. And she's not going to be good until she stops waiting for me to fix this for her. Do you think you ever will? Fix it, I mean. I thought about that question seriously. Did I think there would ever be a day when I could look at Emma and not see betrayal? Did I think there would ever be a time when I could trust her again? I don't know, Mom. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but I honestly don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive what she did. And that's okay, Caroline. You don't owe anyone forgiveness, not even family. Do you think I'm being too harsh? I think you're protecting yourself. And after what they put you through, I think that's exactly what you should be doing. After we hung up, I sat on my couch in my new apartment, looking out at the Atlanta skyline, and I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. The woman who would have forgiven Emma by now. The woman who would have convinced herself that family was more important than pride, that love meant letting people hurt you over and over again. That woman was gone, and I didn't miss her. The woman I was now understood something important. Forgiveness without accountability was just enablement. Love without boundaries was just manipulation. And family that asked you to betray yourself for their comfort wasn't really family at all. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Caroline, this is James Morrison. I wanted you to know that David has left town. He sold his remaining assets and moved to Seattle. I thought you should know he's gone. I smiled at that. David, who had been so proud of his reputation in our small Georgia town, had finally realized that reputation was irreparably damaged. He'd cut his losses and run. Good for him. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Caroline, this is Lisa. Emma wanted me to tell you that she's moving in with our aunt in North Carolina. She says she can't stay here anymore. She says everything reminds her of what she lost. I set the phone aside without responding. Emma was finally learning that actions had consequences, that choices had prices, that she couldn't charm or cry her way out of the mess she'd created. It was a hard lesson, but an important one. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: gratitude. Gratitude that I'd learned who David really was before I married him. Gratitude that I discovered what Emma was capable of before I wasted any more years protecting her from herself. Gratitude that I'd found out I was strong enough to survive the worst betrayal I could imagine. But most of all, gratitude that I'd learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. I was alone now, for the first time in years. No fiancé, no relationship with my sister, starting over in a new city where nobody knew my story. But I wasn't lonely. Because I finally had the one thing I'd been missing my whole life: complete trust in myself. And that, it turned out, was worth more than all the forgiveness in the world. 1 year later, I was standing in the break room at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, watching the coffee maker drip slowly into the pot, when Dr. Marcus Webb walked in. Marcus was the head of pediatric surgery, about 5 years older than me, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of steady presence that made parents trust him with their children's lives. We'd been working together for 6 months, and I'd noticed the way he looked at me during staff meetings, the way he always seemed to find reasons to consult with me on cases. "Long day?" he asked, reaching around me for a coffee mug. 16-year-old with a complex heart defect. We got her stabilized, but it's going to be a long recovery. "You did good work in there today, Caroline. That kid is lucky to have you." I smiled at him, and I realized that somewhere in the past few months, I'd started looking forward to these casual conversations. Started noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he remembered details about my cases, the way he made me feel valued as both a doctor and a woman. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Are you planning to ask me out?" He nearly dropped his coffee mug. What? "Because if you are, the answer is yes. But I need you to know some things about me first." Marcus set his mug on the counter and turned to face me fully. "Okay." A year ago, I was supposed to get married. 2 hours before the ceremony, my fiancé told me he'd been having an affair with my sister for 3 months. Marcus's eyebrows rose, but he didn't interrupt. Instead of quietly canceling the wedding, I turned it into a public confession. I forced him to admit his affair in front of 300 guests. I destroyed his reputation, his business relationships, and his standing in our community. I did it deliberately, and I don't regret it. "Good for you." I blinked. "Good for me." "Caroline, the man cheated on you with your own sister. He humiliated you in the worst possible way. The fact that you fought back instead of quietly disappearing shows character. Some people would say it shows cruelty. Some people would be wrong." I studied his face, looking for judgment or concern or any sign that he thought I was the kind of woman who would be too difficult, too complicated, too damaged to be worth pursuing. I found none of those things. "There's more," I said. "I haven't spoken to my sister since that day. She's tried to contact me dozens of times, begged for forgiveness, but I've refused. She moved to another state because she couldn't handle living with the consequences of what she'd done." "Do you miss her?" The question caught me off guard. I miss who I thought she was. But that person never really existed. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Caroline, can I tell you something about my marriage?" I hadn't known he'd been married. My ex-wife cheated on me for 2 years. With my brother. Oh. When I found out, everyone expected me to forgive them. "Family is family," they said. "Blood is thicker than water. Turn the other cheek." All the things people say when they want you to enable bad behavior so they don't have to deal with the discomfort of choosing sides. What did you do? I divorced her, cut contact with my brother, and moved across the country to start over. That was 8 years ago, and I've never regretted it. We stood there in the break room, looking at each other, and I felt something I hadn't felt since before David, the possibility of being truly understood by someone. "So when I ask you out," Marcus continued, "and you say yes, I want you to know that I'm asking out a woman who values herself enough to demand better from the people in her life. And that's exactly the kind of woman I want to be with." "When you ask me out." "Caroline Mitchell, would you like to have dinner with me this Saturday?" "Yes, I would." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Good. Because I've been trying to work up the courage for months." That Saturday night, over dinner at a quiet restaurant in Buckhead, I told Marcus the whole story. Everything, from the morning of my wedding day to the moment I walked away from Emma in that coffee shop. He listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and when I was done, he reached across the table and took my hand. "You know what I find most impressive about all this," he said. "What?" "You didn't let it make you bitter. You could have used their betrayal as an excuse to never trust anyone again, to close yourself off from love entirely. But you're here, taking a chance on something new. It's taken me a year to get here. That's not very long, considering what you went through." Some people think I should have forgiven them by now. Some people are idiots. I laughed, and it felt good to laugh about it. For the first time in a year, the story of my wedding day didn't feel like a tragedy. It felt like the opening chapter of something better. 6 months later, Marcus and I were official. Another 6 months after that, we were living together. And a year after our first date, on a quiet Sunday morning in my apartment, he asked me to marry him. "Are you sure?" I asked, looking down at the beautiful solitaire diamond he was offering me. "Are you sure you want to marry someone with my history?" "Caroline, I'm not marrying your history. I'm marrying your future." This time, when I planned a wedding, it was different. Smaller. More intimate. Just our closest friends and the family members who had supported us through everything. My mother, of course, and my cousins and aunts and uncles who had stood by me during the worst time of my life. Emma wasn't invited. 3 days before the ceremony, she called me for the first time in over a year. "Caroline, I heard about your engagement. Congratulations." "Thank you. I was wondering if there might be a place for me at your wedding." I was quiet for a long moment. "No, Emma, there isn't." "Caroline, it's been 2 years. I've been in therapy, I've worked on myself, I've learned." "I'm glad you're working on yourself. I genuinely am. But that doesn't change what you did, and it doesn't earn you a place in my new life. I'm your sister. You were my sister. But sisters don't destroy each other's lives for their own selfish desires. Will there ever be a time when you can forgive me?" I thought about that question seriously. In the 2 years since my first wedding day, I'd built an entirely new life. New city, new job, new relationship, new understanding of who I was and what I deserved. I was genuinely happy in a way I'd never been before. Emma, forgiveness isn't something you can demand or earn your way back to. It's something that either happens or it doesn't. And for me, with you, it hasn't happened. So we're strangers forever. We're strangers now because of choices you made. If that changes someday, it will be because I choose to change it, not because you've convinced me I owe it to you. After I hung up, Marcus found me sitting on our couch, staring out the window. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Peaceful," I said, and I meant it. I used to think that holding on to anger would destroy me, that I had to forgive people in order to move on. But I realized something. I'm not holding on to anger. I'm holding on to boundaries. And there's a difference. All the difference in the world. My wedding to Marcus was everything my first wedding should have been. Small, intimate, genuine. When he said his vows, I believed every word. When I promised to love and honor him, I meant it completely. And when Pastor Williams, the same minister who had officiated at my disastrous first wedding, pronounced us husband and wife, I felt something I'd never felt before, absolute certainty that I was making the right choice with the right person. At our reception, my cousin Beth gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes. 2 years ago, we all witnessed Caroline face the worst betrayal imaginable. But what we also witnessed was the birth of a woman who refused to be destroyed by other people's cruelty. Caroline didn't just survive what happened to her, she used it to become someone stronger, wiser, and more magnificent than any of us imagined she could be. She raised her glass. To Caroline and Marcus, and to second chances that are infinitely better than first ones. After our guests had gone home and Marcus and I were finally alone, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd been on my first wedding day. The woman who would have forgiven David and Emma eventually, who would have convinced herself that maintaining relationships was more important than maintaining self-respect. That woman would never have found Marcus. She would never have learned to demand better from the people in her life. She would never have discovered that being alone was infinitely better than being with people who didn't truly value her. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am." "For what?" "For David and Emma." Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's not what I expected you to say. They taught me something I never would have learned otherwise. They taught me that I'm strong enough to survive anything, that I don't need other people's approval to know my worth, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that could happen to you. Because it led you to me. Because it led me to myself. And once I found myself, I was able to find you. As I write this, it's been 5 years since my first wedding day. Marcus and I have been married for 3 years, and we have a beautiful daughter named Hope. We live in a house in the suburbs of Atlanta, and I'm the head of pediatric cardiology at Children's Healthcare. I never did reconcile with Emma. She tried a few more times over the years, sending letters and cards and even showing up at my hospital once. But I held firm to my boundaries, and eventually, she stopped trying. I heard through family that she married someone she met in North Carolina, a man who didn't know about her history with David. I hope she's happy. I hope she learned something from what happened between us. But her happiness isn't my responsibility anymore. David disappeared entirely after he moved to Seattle. I have no idea what became of him, and I don't care to know. People sometimes ask me if I regret how I handled that day at my first wedding. If I regret turning a private betrayal into public humiliation. If I regret refusing to forgive my sister. The answer is no. Not for a single moment. Because that day, standing at that altar in my grandmother's veil, I made a choice to value myself more than other people's comfort. I chose my own dignity over their reputation. I chose truth over politeness. And that choice led to everything good in my life now. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, if you've listened to every word of this journey from betrayal to renewal, I want you to know something. You deserve better than people who betray your trust and expect you to be grateful for the opportunity to forgive them. You deserve better than family members who ask you to sacrifice your self-respect for their comfort. You deserve better than friends who think loyalty means enabling bad behavior. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions, respect that doesn't have to be earned over and over again, and relationships with people who value you enough to treat you well in the first place. Don't let anyone convince you that holding boundaries is the same as holding grudges. Don't let anyone tell you that forgiveness is mandatory or that family is more important than your own well-being. And if someone betrays you the way David and Emma betrayed me, don't you dare let them convince you that you're being cruel by refusing to make their guilt your problem to solve. You are not responsible for other people's redemption. You are responsible for your own happiness. Choose yourself. Choose your dignity. Choose your boundaries. And if you do, if you're brave enough to value yourself more than other people's opinion of you, I promise you'll discover something wonderful. You're so much stronger than you ever imagined. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, wherever you're watching from, wherever you are in your own journey, you deserve better than anyone who makes you question your worth. Hit that subscribe button if this story resonated with you, and drop a comment below telling me about a time you chose yourself over other people's comfort. Because those stories matter. And sometimes, they change everything.